7 months ago, Don Ibbison was raising pheasant chicks with care and devotion. Now he's leading his team of beaters through the woods and fields, driving the full-grown birds towards the guns. It's easy to forget that this is the country pattern, the careful rearing of young animals by herdsmen, shepherds, and then they go to the abattoir. Don Ibbison, gamekeeper, is a shepherd of pheasants. He works for people who farm their own land, a family of 2 brothers and a sister and a brother-in-law, running 3 farms in Wessex. The keenest on organised shooting is Dr. Nigel. Dr. Nigel actually lives on another farm where there's another keeper, but he also runs the shooting on this one.
They always defeat you, don't they?
I was beaten for speed on 1 or 2 occasions.
I was beaten for everything. But I mean the birds, the number that went straight on.
Dr. Nigel collaborates with his brother
Just stop taking your hat off and stamping on it.
and his brother-in-law to take the general decisions about rearing and shooting.
Well, it doesn't matter, that's 5, you didn't change it.
It's Don's job to carry out these plans in detail so that at the end of a day's shooting, there's been a satisfactory day's sport. For the owners, a satisfactory shoot on this farm doesn't actually depend on the number of birds shot, but rather on the general mood of the day, the friends who came and the skill needed to shoot the birds. It's also a day out for the beaters, who are likely to finish the day wet, cold, but on the whole cheerful. It makes a break from their usual farm work. For Don, it's an anxious day. It's the justification of his year's work, so if it's gone smoothly, he's about to relax.
All right, what do you do?
The birds are examined and sorted at the end of the day. Some are given away, most are kept on the farm. The surplus birds are sold. It's the first time they've been touched since they were released from the rearing pens. 168 pheasants.
168, I'll say. 96 cocks, 72 hens.
Don is a Yorkshireman. He started keeping when he was 18.
At the beginning, I was only part-time, looking after a bit of a rough shoot, with mainly wild birds and rabbits, anything. That's when I was single. Then when I got married 10 years ago, I took a full-time keeper's job, because before that it's a bit of a job to get in full-time keeping. You know, they won't let you have a house unless you're married. And we moved down to Surrey. We were there 2 years. Then we moved here, been here 7 years.
They have a cottage in the middle of the farm, about a mile from any other house. It's a mixed farm, 150 milking cows and 1,000 acres of land, divided between cereals and grass for the dairy herd. It's called Manor Farm. It was once part of the estate of a great house. It's not one of the enormous farmhouses, just an elegant, comfortable one. It's the sort of farm that produces a substantial cash flow, which doesn't mean the profits are large, especially in the present general financial situation. The balance between the costs of feeding cattle and the returns is a tough one, and many dairy farms are in real difficulties. Over the last 2 years, cereals have done better than cows. Because there are different sources of income, the farm is more likely to maintain its stability.
6, sorry. 6. You're 7, aren't you?
Stand at about 7 and a bit.
In January, there's the last shoot of the season, but it's not quite the same as the others. This time, Don and other keepers and people who helped in earlier shoots are the guns.
Will you be up under the wood? Yeah. And I'm...
Happy warmer up there.
Yeah, I'm going to be down the bottom here somewhere in the gap between 1 and 2.5.
And leading the beaters is Dr. Nigel. It's a way for the family to say thank you to the keepers and everybody else who helped them with the shooting. This is a day that's meant to be fun for everybody taking part. That is, if you ignore the small gale and the freezing temperature. While Don shoots, his dogs quiver hopefully, watching every wing beat. They seem to know which birds he's shooting at. There is a practical aspect to the keeper's shoot, to remind each side, keepers and owners, of the other's point of view and problems. Don's dogs are mother and daughter, Belle and Jan. Belle is 6 years old, Jan is nearly 4, and still a bit frivolous, and they're a bit jealous of each other. Any bird that's missed at this shoot is safe from legal guns till next autumn, though it's still got poachers and natural dangers to avoid.
Bit drafty up there.
Blimey. They all come back look for the keeper, didn't they?
Yeah.
Morning, Donald.
Or in them.
They were, yes, I did see
He's
them.
going to drive across the
Yeah, why another gun on the end?
Mr. Swain, retired farmer,
You were still doing
Mr.
your
Harper,
landing.
gamekeeper.
Oh, they came over,
They left them behind in that cow.
They did
We
they?
saw them coming into the end of that cow all the time when they were late back.
Couldn't get it out.
There were only 3 beaters in
Yeah.
that cow, and they
Several
never
went
found
back
them.
over up there anyway.
But several went back over, didn't
Yeah.
they, Red?
We know
quite a few
2
went back
cocks
over.
come early into the end of that cow this end, and they never came out.
This is where they always laugh at us anyway. That's right.
Oh, he was lower for you when he came. That
He was
big
all right
one.
for me. I was coffee housing that early one.
Thinking which one do you do that one over?
Way over, yeah, down by the house.
that's
Down by
all
the
right,
house, yeah.
Yeah,
I should
that's
imagine them
far.
back here after lunch.
Yeah. So that
Turn do it the other way.
Terrible mess of it. You know, I reckon that's
What
5 yards
upset
behind.
us early on, we could see the birds coming into this cow here, and then when the birds came through, they couldn't come out.
Come on, Jilly.
In the winter, Don has time for the traditional spare time hobby of keepers.
I like working on my own better than with anybody else. You can sort of leave off for half an hour and go and do something else, or you can carry on all day. You can stop and start and more or less please yourself when you work on your own. I shouldn't think it's all that isolated. You see farm chaps about the place and have a natter to them, and woodmen and other people like that. If you like going out to the pub every night, a theatre, or somewhere else, going out at nightlife, it's, I suppose you could consider it isolated then. But you've got to make it your life and enjoy that type of life, else it's no good being in keeper in because you're just wasting your time, the boss's time, and his money.
It's also in winter that improvements to the bird cover are planned for next year's season.
Well, I think, John, what about 30 yards out here and about 40 off that corner?
40 from that corner.
That ought to, running away to nothing up round the corner here.
Yeah.
I think that seems good. Well, I'll go on do 40 out there, and if you do 30 out there, we'll put sticks out afterwards. Okay.
The best boss is the one that understands just what your job entails. More or less leave you to get on with the job, as long as you produce the end result. And there's a keen on shooting, and the main thing is that they understand your job. There's a lot of syndicate shoots that the owners of them, they don't understand what work the keeper has to put in. They think that because they pay for 1,000 birds to go on the rearing field, there's going to be 1,000 birds going over them on a shoot day. They don't understand the pitfalls there is to it.
Winter is the only time all the keepers in the area can take time off, so they have a keeper's dinner. The date's kept secret so that poachers don't hear about it, and there is a rumour that they also invite one or two friends who otherwise might take an evening walk through a likely wood. The keepers also like to say thank you to people who've helped them.
Stayed the night with him. So next morning he said, after breakfast, what do I owe you? She said, nothing. He said, surely I'll give you something. Can I give you a present? And he said, she said you could. What do you want? He said, I want a knife, a pocket knife with 2 blades, a large blade, a small blade, a corkscrew, a tin opener, and a thing that you take stones out of a horse's hooves with. So he went and got her one, you see, brought her back and gave it to her. She walked across the room, pulled open a drawer. He looked in there, and there was dozens of these knives in there. He said, whatever are you going to do with all these knives? Well, she said, I'm a nice young lady now. I can get a young man just when I want him. But she said, when I'm an old lady, you'll be surprised what a Boy Scout will do for one of these.
We're only the bloody poachers.
They said, come to dinner tonight so we know where you buggers are, you see.
Then you enjoy your evening.
Come on! You soppy old thing.
Oh, your habit then, my dear.
I was going to come inside, Sam, but I thought better of it.
Why not? Yeah. You know this will broaden your outlook.
Yeah.
The older keepers become famous characters in the shooting world. By the time a man like Jack Lewis has worked for 50 years, he's well known throughout the estates of Britain, and his experiences have given him a very personal view of rich and aristocratic landowners. He started keeping in the 1920s.
Here's a peacock coming, see?
Theoretically, he's retired now, but he's still just as active. One of his sons has taken over his job on the same estate, but gamekeeping doesn't always run in families. Many come to it from town childhoods, as Jack did, for a variety of reasons.
Well, partly through getting caught with a farmer stealing eggs, i.e. bird eggs and pheasant eggs. And he took me to task over it. And he said, look, I think you'd better do something better than that. He said, we'll find you a job. And I had been and asked him for a job on the farm, you see, to work amongst the cattle, etc. And he took me to the head gamekeeper and introduced me to this huge man. I was terrified of him, but anyway, he told me to come and see him at the weekend with my father. My father took me along there and I got the job. I was 14 years of age then.
Don was older when he became a full-time keeper, but he'd started long before then.
We were always interested when we were at school. As boys, we were school holidays, and at night, after tea, after school, we were roaming about countryside somewhere, getting places where we shouldn't be, bird nesting, things like that. I always had an interest in it. We did farm work as boys after school as well, turnip striking, things like that. I suppose it just sort of developed from there.
Don traps vermin, rats, weasels, stoats, foxes, all the year round. Each skeleton means one less set of teeth to kill game.
1907 I started, and
Don regularly visits 83-year-old Viv Townsend, who started as a keeper in Edwardian England.
But that was my hobby. I started when directly I left school. I had to be trapping, doing something. The more traps I could get down, the better it was for me. I used to get a penny a tail, you know, for all these things, penny a head. Yeah. Everything, well, except herons. Herons for the boys. Half a crown for each of them. In fact, I dream about it now. I go back down there, down at my home, very often. And I can see some of the places there almost as if it's like yesterday. Yes, it's just in your brain somewhere, isn't it? I want to be after something. I just about shout. My wife gets on to me because I shout so much at night. Rare the place. Yes. How's the lamb going? All right?
Oh, not so bad.
Keepers' wages are related to the agricultural wages for craftsmen, but it's not a job that men do for high wages, but because the way of life satisfies them. Because of the job and the isolation, Don has the use of a van and a Land Rover. There are other advantages to being a keeper. Tips from the visiting guns at a shoot, as many rabbits as he wants, and the cottage.
You've always got to be observant and seeing things and being able to access things. When you're walking about, you look out an odd soft patch where there's a fox about there or anything else moved across it, or where vermin's working, signs of anything that a fox has killed or a stoat's killed. Each vermin usually has its own trademark. You can usually tell what's killed a certain thing.
You give them pheasants to look after and they're killed and they're eaten. You've got to set about it and find out what does these things, and you soon learn. Foxes are very, very cunning and very clever, but I still think the human mind can defeat him. There are the occasional ones as are very, very clever and keep on getting away. But I'm sorry to say that they come to an end, and this happens to all of them.
Well, I think, Don, this bit has had its day. It's obviously needs reseeding if we're going to do anything, and it wasn't that successful this year, was it?
Well, we'll have a look and
We'll measure that out in a
bit.
bit, yes.
Yep.
We'll go down and have a look at that bit of coppice we thinned this.
Kale is left growing and trees are planted to encourage wild pheasants to breed naturally on the farm and to be cover for the reared birds.
They haven't half gone away this year. What have they made?
Keep the wind out.
They made a yard this year, didn't they? You found quite a lot in here this time when you drove it, didn't you? More in here than now.
No, the beaters will be complaining if it's too thick.
They do.
Can't get through.
I expect they complain anyway, don't they?
Surely do.
Look, that's a lovely beater's trap, isn't it? Shin kicker, that one. Even through here, it's again another
Twice every day, Don inspects his snares and traps. In the past, there were no restrictions as to what could be killed or how it could be killed. Humane ideas slowly arrived. The man trap against poachers was the first to go. Birds were protected, the gin trap abolished, and traps must be anchored. Don snares or shoots about 60 foxes a year. The farm is surrounded by large woods where foxes breed and the land is not hunted. It's a harsh fact of country life that foxes and breeding young birds are incompatible. A fox in a chicken run or amongst young pheasants is as lethal as a machine gun, 100 or 200 dead in a night. Don lost no birds to intruding foxes in 1975. January to April is Don's easiest time. They usually have to take an Easter holiday because he can't get away in the summer. The keeper's year always starts in February or March with a capture of pheasants for egg laying.
It's a good life, but you've got to be more or less make it your whole life, your job and hobby as well. There's 7 months of the year where you can't get away even for a day. Not when you, especially when you're single-handed. It's about 7 months of the year when you can't even take one day off. But anybody that makes it the life, I think it's a good life.
A fair proportion of birds are left at the end of the shooting season, and Don feeds them during the winter to encourage them to stay on the farm and to keep them in good breeding condition. Don traps about 150 birds and puts them into pens, but that leaves a substantial number of birds to breed in the wild. Once the pheasants are put into the egg-laying pens, they are there for several months, settling down to begin with, and then laying eggs. The old ways of egg incubation and hatching were extremely slow and cumbersome. Don could raise twice as many chicks by himself as the old keepers. 1,000 was their limit, and he could raise 2,000.
Now I'm going to put one lot there. See? Yeah. There's the line down through there. Next coop will be 10 yards down there.
The old techniques have vanished completely, but the old keepers like to make sure that the younger keepers know what they were.
Where did he go?
Down there. Wait a minute, I'll call him now. That's about it. That's okay. Undo the button down there, look. So there's one hen and 17 chicks to go in here, look. Okay?
Yeah.
That's when they come out, look. They'll be underneath there if Joby Hawk comes over.
Oh,
They'll be in underneath there.
Yeah.
Push one down there, look down the same as that down there, and pen that, wait a minute, get that down the bottom, else you'll lose them. That's right. Tight?
Yeah.
All right.
When we first started rearing pheasants on this estate, we had our pheasants on what was known as the open system, a hen in a coop with 16 or 17 pheasants, 25 yards, 30 yards apart, which in some cases took up 50, 60 acres.
That's one hen, 17 chicks. Now they stop in your 3 days. See?
Yeah.
Then you take these away the third day.
Yeah.
Move the coop on one length down there, look. And this here. And this, you take away that spare. You don't want that. That's for the next use.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feed, 6 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
All food in those days was cooked. In the early stages, eggs bought wholesale, milk to make custards, of which was made in big pots. These custards were made and let cool, and then put through sieves, mixed up with wheat meal, barley meal, maize meal, various spices, and all this meant hours of preparation and had to be fed 4 times a day.
After the 10 o'clock feed in the morning, you go along, about 10:30 we'll see, and every coop got to be moved once over the length, just about there.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Rabbits were the chief source of protein, which someone had to get to the tune of 20, 30 every evening. These were skinned and cooked whole and put through mincers and mixed in proportion whatever size the pheasants were.
This is 6 o'clock feed. There. You go on to your next coop, do the same thing. When you come at night, look, I'll use this one instead of that one. Now that, you should pick up that one there. I'm coming down there, down the line of coops. Only behind. Don't make the least sound. If you rattle the shutter, you will see all the heads on the next line coming out. That means 10 minutes wait. All right?
The modern keeper avoids a lot of the tedious work of the past. The eggs from Don's pheasants are sent away to a game farm to be put into incubators. And then, when he's ready, he'll be sent 1,500 chicks. Many estates sell their eggs to the game farm. They don't necessarily get chicks hatched from their own eggs back, which helps to prevent inbreeding. The laying season runs from April to June. Don's first batch of chicks was sent to him on the 10th of June and the second batch on the 17th of June. And they arrived in a summer thunderstorm to be protected in their centrally heated brooders. Heavy rain and thunderstorms kill many wild pheasant chicks, but 1975 was a splendid summer for them as well as for everyone else.
You are independent to a certain extent, so you're in a position of trust to do your job, and if you don't do it, you take days off when you shouldn't, things like that, it tells on the shoot at the end of the year. You don't have such good results on most places if it's a difficult place to keep birds on. But to a certain extent, you are, yeah, independent.
Once the chicks have arrived, Don's life starts before dawn and ends after dark. He starts and ends each day with the chicks. In between, he's getting their next home ready. The large pens where they're released to learn how to live in the wild. Large enclosed woods where they can be fed, protected from foxes, and kept under control till after harvest on the farm. Don did take 2 days off between May and October. On July the 25th, 26th, he took the children to see his mother in Yorkshire and went to the game fair.
The game cooking demonstration starts. Please note that there will be only one more game cooking demonstration today, and that is...
The game fair, held at Chatsworth in 1975, is the annual meeting place for everybody who shoots and fishes, the owners, keepers and followers of field sports in Britain.
Hey, leave that alone. What time is it? Are you watching something now?
I think I'll watch dogs here.
They'll come down this way, they'll work there.
I have one other announcement. Could the Services Committee members report to Mr. Baker the litter situation? Thank you.
There are probably about 6,000 keepers in Britain, and most of them seem to attend the fair.
I'll see you there later. Everybody, see you later.
It's an occasion for demonstrations of skill, a chance to entertain the visitors by showing just how good a fisherman can be or how skillful and obedient a gun dog should be.
Between both Spaniels and Retrievers from Messrs. From Lancashire. Now, the yellow bitch in the water, going across to the far side. Taking the shortest route back across the water. There goes diversion doubling up into the air.
Have you set that up then?
Well,
No, you have a go.
You can't set it, there's no string on it. But it keeps moving fingers out.
Yeah.
Ready? Yes. Miss. The Vice President of the Gamekeeper Committee is now about to present the Long Service Awards to a number of gamekeepers. First is Mr. George Wilford. Would he come forward, please?
Really nice. Where do you come from? Oh, not so far away. Not very far away. It was really nice to see you again. Very, very congratulations.
After 50 years of devoted work, public recognition. The Duchess of Devonshire makes the presentations, the sporting papers take the photographs. In a Britain that sometimes seems as unstable as a rowing boat in a hurricane, some estates have continued without fundamental change. And there are men here who've spent most of their lifetimes inside the estate fences.
Next is Mr. Smith, who has been at William Strip Park.
You come from Gloucestershire?
Yes, that's right.
North County. I know very well. I've seen him the other day.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, in London.
Oh, yes, good.
It's very nice to see you up
Yeah,
there.
thank you very much.
There is a gentleman here, Mr. Woosnam, who is the chairman of the next game fair, which will be in Wales. I think he's probably shivering in his shoes.
Don was anxious about his young pheasants all the time he was away, and he and Jill rushed back from the game fair to release the last batch. 1975 was a good year for rearing pheasants, but a bad year for gamekeepers. Many were laid off. They're a fringe luxury that's the first to go in a recession, especially the keepers for syndicates. Syndicates are often businessmen who hire the shooting rights over some land and put a keeper in, but have no other part in the farm. They have to pay the full economic cost of shooting, and it's very high. Each bird actually shot represents about £6. Calculated this way, Don's costs would be about £9,000 a year. But Don's employers farm their own land, so it's a different situation. Though still expensive, many of Don's operations are beneficial to the farm as a whole, since he controls vermin, rabbits and hares, and 3 hares can eat as much as a sheep. He also improves the habitat, not only for game, but for all birds. The young birds are ready to be released about 6 weeks old. They've been nursed through childish ailments like gapes and feather pecking, and when they are released, the wing feathers are trimmed to stop panic flights out of their fox-proof protected pen. Also, they're injected against fowl pest and tagged to provide information about bird movements on the farm. They won't actually be handled again until they're shot or trapped again for next year's breeding. These are the jobs that Don needs help with, although his wife works with him much more than that.
Started, I think, when we were first down south, before we got the children, and had nothing much, you know, you can't do your housework all day, you know, just to go walks round with Don and help, and it's just developed from there, and, you know, I've done a bit more perhaps and a bit more, and, well, I should miss it now if I couldn't go out with him any time and potter about. I'd rather be out with Don very often rather than doing the housework.
Foxes, Adam. Oh, one for me. I now won't get foul pest.
When the pheasants were 6 weeks old, they were taken to the woods, and I had to go with them and live with them. We were provided with shepherd's huts on wheels, which there had been 3 of us living on the rearing field, taking it in turns. When the time came to get into the wood, he was on your own. And we had to stop there till, well, incidentally, I had 4 years, and I lived in the hut for the whole of the 4 years, winter and summer. Stuck with the pheasants the whole of the time. And of course, one had lots of various all types of mishaps, one thing or another. One experience, I suppose I would be about 20, Sunday afternoon, and the gentleman and lady and the family from the estate came down to have a look at me. I was busy getting my tea ready, and out of the blue he asked me where I got my water from to drink. I said, out of the brook. Well, he said, where do you wash? I said, in the brook. I got a hole dug out there. Well, he said, do you know whether the water's fit to drink? I said, I don't know. I've drunk it for 2 years. Well, he said, you get a bottle, he said, and fill it up and give it to me. I did so. And he went off with the bottle. 4 odd nights later, there was a footman came running down to see me, hard as he could come. He said, you're wanted at the big house immediately. Come on. So I followed him, and I was shown into the house by the butler, taken to the study, where the gentleman sat with a very red face. He said, do you realise, he said, that the water you was drinking contains about all the harmful bugs that it's possible to get? He said, it's been analysed, he said, and it's about the most foulest water. He said, I've made inquiries, which you people never did. All the sewers run into it, from the pigs and the cattle and from the buildings. And he said, in future, he said, you've got to stop it immediately.
August. The pheasants are about to try their wings and start travelling freely around the farm. Don's last big effort of the year starts at this time, the effort to keep the birds from straying. From now on, he'll be feeding pheasants on the mown strips that he cuts through the grass. The farm produces about 1,000 tons of cereal a year. Don's days are very long now. He watches the birds from before dawn till after dark. Although they're not grown enough to attract poachers yet, they're extremely vulnerable to foxes or stoats.
Stoat with a pheasant, he usually has 2 teeth marks at the back of the head, and they'll bite the top of the skull out. Whereas a rat, there's usually just two teeth marks on the neck. Stoats will kill a full-grown pheasant. I've watched one kill it, pull it down from the base of the just at the back of the head.
After keeping for a lifetime, the older keeper's attitudes to life become personal and individual. But it seems unlikely that Don will ever think the same way as Jack Lewis.
As a boy, one used to think the rich people and the gentle people that came weren't even to be looked at. One went days and days and was never spoken to and was never even looked at. But as time went on, and one got to a few words of good morning, and from that it got to something else, and time, like everything else, makes inroads. One was then, came to think that, well, I must be a human being like everybody else. And this was carried through both parties, and as I got into married life, I found that people took interest in me. And for instance, when our children were born, the lady from the big house was the first to bring presents, little clothes, food, and really take interest in what was happening and what we wanted. And this was greatly appreciated and passed on. I must say that many people would never believe this was true, but on all estates I've been on, these people invariably had most of the servants' interest at heart. As one gets older, this happens more than ever, and when one is proved and been trusted, then in return one gets a lot of perks and a great lot of help and assistance. I think on some of the well-known estates in England, on one especially I knew, the head keeper was more of a friend to the Duke than any of his so-called friends in business or by relation. This was a well-known fact. Whatever the Duke did, he had to see the head keeper first and get his opinion and his authority. And this, I have found, is not only isolated to one place, but a good many. And in return, I should be very, very sorry to see the day when the aristocrats and the country people in general that have the big houses and the estates, be a very sorry day for this country when they have to go. I cannot see what England will be without them. Myself, I think it's a necessity.
September and October are roundup time. The natural tendency of a large flock of pheasants is to spread out and leave the farm. Jill and Don spend hours travelling round the boundaries and driving them back.
What's your bow?
Right. Okay. Bye.
Once the birds are off Don's beat and onto other people's land, he can't get them back. He's surrounded by farms that don't rear pheasants, so his wanderers are very welcome.
I know Don's tied down a lot, you know, and he's very conscientious about his work. But I don't know, it seems free. Probably we're not free, but we always seem to be free of regular hours. I think that's, you know, there's no regular hours. It's not a 9 to 5. Sometimes he'll pop in the afternoon for a cup of tea and I'll go out round with him, you know, for an hour or so before the children come home, and there is a great sense of freedom, I think.
A pheasant can run as fast as the average man. When they do start wandering out, really moving, they can cover a good distance in a short time. They'll go down a hedgerow as fast as a man can walk. Pheasants seem to run in preference to flying when they're moving naturally, not when anybody's pushed them up with a dog or beaters, they'll run on in front of the beaters until they get to the flushing place in front of the guns. Then they've got to fly, unless a dog pushes them out of where they're squatting any thick bramble or anything. But in the open wood, where there's not much bottom in it, they'll run rather than fly.
Heel off, push him out.
I like it very much, you know. You can come and go as you like. Well, I just like it. I like living out here on our own as well. I wouldn't particularly like to go and live in the village now. I should feel as though I'm being watched all the time, I think. I'm used to being on our own.
Even though the pheasants see Don many times a day, when he calls them to feed, they become much wilder. He's no longer surrounded by them.
I suppose you've got to, the children, you know, when they're growing up, you've got to be prepared to run them places so that they don't miss out on things. It's easy, I think, to sort of overlook the children, thinking that, you know, if it suits us, it's you know, all right for them all the time, but they've got to have other interests, and you've got to be prepared to run them to youth clubs and things like that.
The season for poachers begins in October. Their main worry is not the man from the village, but gangs who travel fast in cars and collect 100 or 200 birds in a night and sell them for a good profit. Don watches his pheasants closely as they go to roost.
When pheasants are first released, they've no, from the brooder houses, they've no idea of self-preservation at all. As they get out in the wild after a few months, they get a bit more sense, know what a fox is, and realise danger a bit more. Wild pheasants have a bit more sense of preservation. Some mornings when there's a fox about, they'll stay on the roost longer. Main thing is to take the pheasants on nice and slow. When you get them to where you want to flush them, you've got to go very steady so that you flush them steady and not all in one big bunch, or else it's one, they have one bang and that's sort of it finished. You've got to try and run them into a piece of thickish cover or ground cover where you can put them out steady and keep the beaters steady. And anybody that's got a dog that's a bit wild, keep that back when you get towards the end.
Stand a minute.
Well, the boss isn't very pleased if they put them out in a big flush.
When the pheasants are driven towards the guns, nobody considers the cost. For the guns, the owners, it's a day of their favourite sport, a day of great pleasure. And for Don, it's a day when, after a year's solitary work, he's surrounded by people and proves that he's done that year's work successfully.
About halfway to Southampton.
One place we used to go to from Sussex was to North Yorkshire, a fabulous pheasant shoot where on many, many occasions we shot almost 2,000 pheasants a day, often 1,500, 400 or 500 rabbits, 200 hares and probably 50 brace of partridge, all in one day's shooting.
About 1,000, that's the roundabout average that we kill each year. An average year you shoot about 40% of the hand-reared birds. We usually do a little bit better. If you leave a good stock at the end of the year of hens, and you, weather's kind and you keep the vermin to a minimum, you can do fairly well from wild birds.
Right, go on, steady.
I like to see the birds, good sporting birds. Don't like to see birds just killed which are about 15, 20 yards off the end of a gun. I'd sooner let those go for another day or for stock than see them killed like that. I suppose I've got a lot of respect for a pheasant, but I don't like to see them just slaughtered for the sake of it. The guns would sooner have a sporting shot than they'd sooner kill one real high fast bird than about 20 low ones.
Jeff!